right. We got Attorney Robert Scavone. Scavone. I feel like that's so Italian, dude. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty Italian, man.
I love that
pretty
name.
Italian.
That's a solid name. So Robert Scavone, attorney, Palm Beach County, former police officer, former state attorney's office, now doing appellate work for the big bad banks.
No,
The good banks.
Yeah, I mean a little bit of everything.
Okay.
We have sort of a focus on family law stuff.
Okay.
But we do appellate work for any type of civil situation. We don't do too much criminal stuff.
Okay.
And we also do trial support. So for trial attorneys that need help with dispositive motions, need help with jury selection, anything like that, want to preserve issues, we do trial support. We do mock oral arguments.
Oh, that's awesome.
For other appellate attorneys that want to have a mock oral argument. The firm has 2 former 5th DCA judges, so they're great for that kind of stuff. So yeah, a little bit, it's a really good firm. Florida Appeals. If you need appellate work, let me know. I'll help you out.
Awesome. Cool. So tell us, you went to FIU Law. Great law school.
Yes.
Amazing law school.
Yes,
I know some other guys that went there.
Yeah.
Smart people, good people.
Yeah. I went there last night, actually. We did a CLE, professionalism CLE that was hosted by the SBA and was sponsored by a couple of alumni firms.
Okay.
And had a couple judges on the panel and a woman that deals in professionalism. She's an attorney here in Florida, and it was really good. It was nice to get back to the school. I hadn't been there in probably 4 or 5 years. So it was nice to get back and reconnect. Had a great time. Had a little mixer afterward in the atrium, and everybody was really happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Be honest, did you check out your photo in the lobby,
I
in the
didn't.
hallway?
I didn't. When I first walked in, the photos are right there on the left side by the courtroom, and I was like, I got to go run down there and check out the 2012 class, and I never got around to it.
Dude, every time I go, I start snapping photos of people we went to school with that I know.
That's exactly what I wanted to do.
With,
That's
and I'm
exactly
like,
what I wanted to do. Yeah, I wanted to take some. Now it's 11 years old. The picture. I wanted to take some pictures and send them out, and I totally forgot to do it. So I blew that one, man.
Yeah, before it's like before law school, before your career in law. This is what you used to look like when you were happy.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you were like. You were still all enthusiastic about having learned the law and, thinking like, man, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do this and that. And then you get out in private practice and you're like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, it's not so easy.
No, and for me, it was terrible, man. Like after I graduated, I was really fortunate to get 2 clerkships. So I clerked at the 3rd DCA for Judge Lagoa, then Judge Lagoa now on the 11th Circuit. And then I clerked for Judge Jordan on the U.S. 11th Circuit. And I loved it. I was like, all right, I made it. Like this is what the practice of law is, and really wanted to go to the U.S. Attorney's office. Went through the process and made it all the way through the 3 rounds of interviews, and unfortunately didn't have enough litigation experience. So they said, look, go get some litigation experience and try again in a few years. So at the time, Willie Ferrer was the U.S. Attorney, and the philosophy under his administration, or at least what I had heard and doing my discussions with people, was that they really liked people from big law. So I took a shot and went to work for Hunt and Williams down in Miami. And also after that worked for Jackson Lewis, and my experience at both places were the same. Loved the people there, was really fortunate to work for some very, very good attorneys, but just hated the billable hour. And really was just miserable, man. Just absolutely miserable. And still had the desire to be a prosecutor, because that's really why I went to law school. And I had a friend who turned into a mentor at Hunt and Williams that kept telling me every time we'd go out to lunch, he's like, man, if you want to be a trial attorney and be a prosecutor, go to the state attorney's office. And I'm like, dude, I'm making like over $170,000 a year. You want me to go work for $45,000 a year? And he's like, if you want it that bad, you'll do it. And I resisted and resisted and resisted. And then I got to the point where I was so frustrated and miserable. And my wife was like, man, this job is just, it's destroying you. You got to do something else. And I bit the bullet, man. and I went to the state attorney's office, and it was fantastic. You know, it was a great decision. I loved the people there, absolutely loved the mission, and had a really good time, man. Had a really good time. It was the first time, I mean, other than the clerkships, where I was like happy about going to work. And, you know, still stay in touch with a lot of those people. Just like I said, absolutely love them and the mission. But eventually it got to the point where, you know, making $56,000 a year, you know, in hindsight.
You jumped in knowing what you were going to get paid.
I did. Then, you know, and I talk to people about that a lot too. They're like, you went in knowing that. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I went in knowing that. But what really was the tipping point for me, I guess there were two tipping points really. Number one was the money factor. But more specifically, I started to look around at people who were there longer than I was. And I saw how long it was taking for them to advance to like specialty units, which is where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to organized crime, which is a really small unit. It's got really
Scavone, organized crime.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a really small unit. It's got really good attorneys in it. A lot of those people stay for a long time, and I'm looking at that, and I'm also looking at the salaries that people are making. Who are at that point, I was there for a little over 4 years, and I'm looking at salaries, you know, because it's all public information, and I'm seeing what people there 7, 8 years out are making, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, you know, at the time I was 49. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't have 25 years where I can stay here and take, you know, the benefit of the drop program and the pension and all that stuff, because I got into law school as a second career. And, you know, I just said, man, it's going to take me a lot longer than I thought to kind of move up and be in a position I want to be in. And I just decided I needed to go and start maximizing my income because, you know, got to retire at some point, got to have some money in the bank, and don't. So I got to do something.
Right.
So that was a big part of it. And the other part of it was I wasn't too crazy about the administration there.
Bureaucracy, you mean, like the politics, or
a little bit of the politics, but I mean, you know, that goes wherever you're at. You know, I also wasn't, and I'm not a big fan about how Ehrenberg runs his shop. He's not all that involved, and
he's busy on MSNBC or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. He's way too busy on national publications talking about stuff that he's probably got no business talking about.
Yeah.
And that has a way of trickling down, man. It's like, you know, you want your boss to be around and, you know, checking in on you and seeing how things are going. And morale at the office was just really tanking. And I think part of that had to do with COVID.
COVID and the money situation.
Yeah.
Because right now you can't find a lawyer to save yourself, especially one with experience.
Yeah.
Prosecutors obviously have a ton of experience, and then that could deal with stress. What could be more stressful than prosecuting someone for a crime they committed? So, you know, attorneys are in high demand, and I know people probably soliciting you left and right. Hey, what are you getting paid? I'll pay you triple. I'll pay you quadruple.
Dude, it's crazy. I was talking to somebody last night at the event at FIU, and he was telling me that he had recently lost like a fourth-year attorney. And I mean, I can't believe these numbers. Lost a fourth-year attorney to Greenberg for like over $300,000. I'm like, that can't be, because I mean that would destroy their whole salary structure.
They need bodies because
it's crazy, man. It's crazy, but you know, a lot of the other supervisors at the office were great. But like I said, I just felt like morale was really low, and I thought that the top really needed to do something about that, and it didn't seem like they were interested in it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they'll bring in free pizza every once in a while and expect that to kind of mend the fences. And I was like, no, that's not how you run a shop.
There's a lot of memes about that floating around. My office manager, Dave, sends me the meme. It's like, buy free, you know, staff wants like extra PTO day.
Yeah.
Just get them free pizza instead.
Just get them free pizza.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a combination of a lot of things. The commute also was killing me. You know, I live in Broward.
Okay.
And when from the time I calculated it not long ago, I'd started law school in 2008. All of my jobs up to the point that I went to the state attorney's office were in Miami, downtown. And then after that, I was driving to West Palm. And I think from 2008 till the time I left the state attorney's office, I had driven like over 300,000 miles.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I'm done spending an hour and a half, or an hour to an hour and a half each way in the car every day.
You'll get no pity from me. I drive to Miami twice a week and the West Coast once a week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. But, when you got a chauffeur, you can do those things.
No, I don't have a chauffeur, man. I wish. We actually joke because Alvaro rides with me, my buddy. And when we get to the West Coast, everybody's like, who's this guy? And he goes, nah, don't worry about him. He's just a chauffeur. And
I
I'm
thought
like,
it was a chauffeur or a helicopter, maybe. I
no,
thought you had a helipad on
I
the top
need
of this roof.
I could use a helicopter. That's if I'm getting anything, it's gonna be a private jet, but it ain't no helicopter. But yeah, but one day we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, you're definitely on your way, man.
Thanks.
I don't know that people know this, but you contributed a very significant amount of money to the law school to name that career center in your name, and it was the biggest donation at the time to the law school. I think it still might be the biggest
bigger
donation.
one. Did you know that?
Did you?
Yeah, I did a $750,000 scholarship for the law school last year. Nobody talked about it.
How did I miss that?
Nobody talked about it, dude.
What?
Dean Acosta bragged about my
the 400,000 was all over the place.
Yeah, and then I did a big one for it's for after their first year, they're going into their second year of law school. If they have like a really high GPA and they're local, they're from Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County, they can apply, at FIU Law.
God, man.
Oh, dude, you're too kind. Thank you.
No, that's amazing, man. That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's just so it's so good to see people that are successful giving back.
Thank you.
And but between you and I and everyone who's listening, the law school's just not really good about reciprocation.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say anything about it, but I when I was there after I graduated, I put together an evening scholarship program because the way things work in law schools, evening students don't get scholarships.
Okay, you were in the evening program too.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah,
I started out in the evening program.
Yeah, so I got to the point where I was like, all right, we got to figure out a way to get some evening student scholarships going. So I started an evening scholarship program and got a ton of evening students, evening graduates to join in.
Mm-hmm.
And we had raised like probably around $80,000 for evening scholarships. And, this was a long time ago. So the people that are in place right now are not responsible for this.
Yeah.
But the people that were in place at the time just never bothered to go out and collect.
Wow. Oh, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah.
You raised all the money and nobody made the phone call to get the checks or whatever.
Yeah. So they wound up collecting like a third of it.
Yeah.
And, it really pissed me off because I had spent a lot of time and effort recruiting the people and, people made commitments and a lot of them were turned off about the way things panned out. They were like, what is this about, man? I pledged to give this money and then nobody follows up with me.
Yeah. It's funny. You and Molinaro threw that big casino night and you guys raised a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And I loved it so much that we threw one. That was years ago.
Yeah.
We threw one last year, finally. We were going to throw it, and then COVID hit, so we had to cancel it. And then, we finally threw one last year, which was 2022, February 2022. Threw one again this year. Both years we raised like $15,000 for the Boys and Girls Club.
That's awesome.
And we threw it because you guys gave me the idea, and I was like, dude, it was so much fun, that casino night. Is that how you guys raised the money? Or that was a separate thing that you raised money?
No, that was a separate thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a separate thing.
Because that was another debacle. You guys raised all that money, and then the school messed up with the collections or something.
Not as bad as with the evening scholarship program, but there were some issues. But the casino night, all in all, was a big success. We did that to raise money for the clinical program.
Okay.
And we wound up raising about $25,000.
Okay.
But more importantly, we had like 200 alumni there, and it was down at the art gallery down in Coral Gables.
Yeah, it was like a garden, right?
Yeah, it was just really well attended. We had like Mercedes was a sponsor. They had one of the cars out there. It was great. It was a great night. Everybody loved it. So I just love doing that stuff, man. Look, the law school, as much as we complain about being lawyers and and the practice of law, the law school changed the trajectory of my life. Mm-hmm. And so I really left there wanting to pay that back. And I still feel that way. That's why I helped out with the SBA last night. Yeah. With the CLA program because I like getting our alums engaged and going to see the friends that I missed from way back then. It's a good time.
Yeah, I love the law school, and that's why I do the donations there, is because it's important to me. It did change the trajectory of my life, and started with nothing, and I was able to get to where I'm at now because of the law degree that I had, which I couldn't do without it. So Awesome. And so let's get back to the you're at the prosecutor's office. You're like, hey, morale's low, money's tight. This is the time for me to jump back into private practice. And why appellate law?
Well, I loved clerking.
Okay.
And I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to research and writing.
Okay.
And I really, the thing that I liked most about the state attorney's office was not trial work. It was actually motion practice. I loved going in and arguing dispositive motions. So, you know, it's akin to oral argument. So a lot of the things that I enjoyed most about law, you find in appellate practice. So those were the, you know, some of the big reasons why I wanted to do it. And, you know, litigation to me, I mean, it's funny because the commentary is always that civil litigation is actually a lot less civil than criminal litigation. And I think that's true, you know, in large part, maybe because with the criminal defense bar is relatively small in a particular county. And you're really, you know, when you're a prosecutor, you're generally dealing with the lawyers that really are just working in that county where you work. It wasn't often that we would get defense counsel from Broward or Miami-Dade.
Be honest. How do you feel about Miami lawyers coming up to Palm Beach County? Always late.
Yeah.
Bad attitude.
Yeah,
what?
we used to complain that the further south you go, the worse the attorneys get.
I've heard that so many times.
Yeah,
the guys in Broward are like, "Oh, it's a Miami guy," and then the guys in Palm Beach are like, "Oh, it's a Broward guy."
Yeah. And maybe you get up to Hendry County and it's Palm Beach County guy, but
yeah.
But this, you know, the criminal defense bar or the criminal bar is generally pretty civil. You know, but one of the things I did not like about the limited time I spent in civil litigation before I went to the state attorney's office was just, a lot of the times I felt like we were just fighting to fight. You know, it's just like, how many hours can we burn? You know, can we bill? How much can we churn this case? And that's not what I got into the law for. You know, it's as corny as it sounds. I love the law. You know, that's why I do my own podcast on the law. And I think that it's important. Getting back to your original question about appellate work, one of the things that I like most about it is you get the opportunity to fix mistakes. Judges are busy, they make mistakes, and lawyers are busy, they make mistakes. And when you can help correct those mistakes and sort of, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, fix the law, that's rewarding to me. So I think those are those are some of the reasons why I decided appellate work was for me.
Okay, cool. And you miss anything from the state attorney's office?
Oh yeah. I mean,
free pizzas. They don't get free pizzas at your new job.
No, I actually boycotted the pizzas. I was like, I'm not going to get that pizza, man. You're not selling me with that pizza.
Yeah.
I miss the people most. I think prosecutors get a really bad rap sometimes. You know, everybody thinks prosecutors hate defendants and they don't care about defendants' rights and all they want to do is lock people up. And, you know, I don't know how things are in other places, but the people I worked with were very conscientious, caring people, wanted to do the right thing, always played by the rules. You know, Scouts Honor never saw a prosecutor trying to bend the rules, you know, tried to do everything they could do to be as ethical as they understood to be. And I just think that they get a lot of them get a bad rap. So I miss the people tremendously. I certainly miss the mission. I think that prosecutorial work is probably the most rewarding work you can do. I know I'm biased because I'm a former prosecutor, but I just the reward that you get out of doing that work and helping victims, and you know this, by helping people that you help. I mean, there's no better feeling.
Yeah.
You know, there's no better
feeling.
feeling.
Somebody.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I certainly miss that.
Did they have a mission statement in writing?
You know, they probably do, but who memorizes?
You keep talking about the mission.
The mission, I mean, in terms of, and it's not unique to the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office. It's just the mission of prosecution. You know, to bring justice to victims, to hold people accountable for the wrongs that they do. that's the mission, to do justice, and to do it fairly and to wear the white hat. That's an amazing job. And it's time that I'll always cherish. And it was, the experience I gained there, that's one thing. I was talking to a student last night at FIU, and he was trying to figure out what he wants to do. He's like, I really want to be a trial attorney, but I'm not sure what to do. And I was like, if you want to be a trial attorney, go to the state attorney's office. Go to the public defender's office. After you get done with your training and you get up to speed, you can have as many trials as you want. And it's like, yeah, but a lot of them are going to kind of be, a lot of them at the beginning, you'll be doing misdemeanors and things like that. And I was like, dude, even a one-day trial is all-encompassing trial experience, because you're going to do motions in limine, you're going to do voir dire, you're going to do opening, closing, cross, direct. You're going to have evidentiary issues that come up. You're going to have to do strikes and peremptories and, all that stuff. It doesn't matter how short the trial is. You're getting all that. So even if whether you do a one-day trial or a 6-week trial, you're going to get that experience. And you can't put a price on it. You can't put a price on being in court, every other week, knocking those things out. Okay. So it's tremendous experience, even if down the road you think you're not going to be, you want to be a litigator, but you may not be in trial all the time, you still can't beat the experience. And as you were saying at the beginning, one of the things you learn is just how to deal with the volume.
Right.
Which every lawyer has to know how to do. Because the volume is just insane wherever you go. And, to be a prosecutor with, 150 cases in felony, that's a lot of volume. And I remember there was one time during COVID, generally speaking, the misdemeanor divisions at the state attorney's office in Palm Beach would have 3 attorneys, sometimes 4 when we were really flush. But there were times during COVID where we were down to 2. And those divisions had 900 to 1,000 cases.
Wow. And you guys got to work them.
You got to work them.
Yeah.
You got to work them. Now, look, a lot of those cases are like diversion type cases that you can get rid of pretty quickly.
Okay.
But that's only, maybe 20-30% of the cases. So you're still looking at 700 cases between 2 people. And every case has stuff to do on it, discovery and motions and depositions. And it's like, man, so you come out of there really well tested.
So let me ask you, how do you feel about this? Let me ask you this. If you could change one thing at the prosecutor's office where you were at, what would you change? If you just had a magic wand and you were just like, boop, what would you change?
I would probably...
Definitely salaries, for one, and the pizzas.
Oh, yeah. You're right. That goes without saying. That's really not something that an individual state attorney can control, though.
It's more at the legislative level.
Yeah.
Right?
The PDs, the PD, if you're a PD or a state attorney, you're kind of handcuffed in terms of, pardon the pun, in terms of the salary. So, yeah, love to change that. That's a great question, and I haven't had time to kind of reflect on it, but I would say that one thing I think that would be really helpful is when felonies come into the office, they usually come in because a police officer has made a felony arrest, and that department sends a packet to the state attorney's office. And then there's a filing attorney who makes a charging decision. So they review the probable cause, they review the reports. Is this the kind of case we want to bring? And they file an information, which is a charging document. So there's a filtering process of what comes in. So there's a funnel of what comes in from the police and gets funneled down through those filing attorneys down to the line attorneys. So the shit cases go away.
Okay.
In misdemeanor land, it's not like that. The charging document's the probable cause affidavit in most cases.
Okay.
And most state attorneys don't have a budget to have a misdemeanor filing division. The filing attorney is the individual line attorney. Okay. So if you get the cases that come in guy trespassing on a damn, railroad track.
Okay.
That's coming in to you. And then you're deciding whether or not that case should move forward. Obviously, with consultation with supervisors. If you have a question about a case that you want to get rid of, you go to a supervisor and say, hey, this is probably not a case we want to prosecute. Here are the legal issues. Here are the factual issues. Maybe we should get rid of this. I think what I would do is try to create a misdemeanor filing division.
Okay.
Or try to create some sort of diversionary program where you could divert a lot of those cases that really should not be consuming a line attorney's time.
Okay. So you're saying basically with the misdemeanors that...
Not all misdemeanors.
Not all. But...
because, you've got misdemeanors that are serious. You've got batteries and you've got, petty theft cases where you got victims involved and things like that. Domestic violence is a misdemeanor. So you have lots of stuff that you don't want to push away. Those are the cases that the attorneys should be working on. Those are the cases that you want your attorneys spending the most time on. Because they're victim crimes, because they're dangerous, because they're violent, something like that. But, the trespassing on the railroad tracks or...
My friend got drunk at over here on Hillsborough down by the beach, and he went back to the bar after they told him to leave. So the cops came, trespassed him, brought him a case. It's like...
Yeah, trespassing's a little bit tricky because there's technically a victim involved.
Okay.
And under Marcy's law in this state, you have to consult with every victim before you make a decision.
Oh, even the bar? Even if it's a bar, a business? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why, for example, if you ever go to first appearance, you'll see prosecutors make time served offers to people who are who are in custody for possession of paraphernalia or possession of marijuana. They'll just make a time served offer right there at first appearance. They've spent a day in jail, time served, you go away. You're into your case.
Okay.
You can't do that with victim crimes.
Okay.
Because you got to have that time to consult with the victim to see whether or not they're okay with it.
Okay, gotcha.
But long story short, if you could find a way, whether it's through a filing attorneys or through some sort of diversion program at first appearance, to eliminate as many cases you can so that the line prosecutors have fewer cases and that the cases that they have are really meaningful cases.
Okay.
I think that would be a great fix.
Great. All right, so quick question. If you could have coffee or cocaine with any historical figure, your choice. We don't have to say on the podcast. Well, who would it be and why?
Oh, my God.
Definitely Rick James
Alive
cocaine.
Or dead?
Alive or dead?
Alive or dead?
Alive or dead.
That's a really, really good question.
And how would you take your coffee?
I take my coffee with sugar and a little bit of cream.
Okay. American coffee is okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty
I like it
straightforward
black.
on that.
Black's the way I go.
I can't do the black. Straight black, man.
Yeah.
It's funny. I always tell my wife I like my coffee like I like my women, dark and strong.
Oh. You can't say the way I like it.
And she gives me shit because she's like, well, I'm not dark. I'm like, you're Puerto Rican. You're pretty dark.
She's fun. She's a lot of fun. I see her on social media, always having a...
She is a lot of fun. Man, that's... have coffee with a historic figure. My goodness. So I think, again, not having time to reflect on these questions. $1 million then. Let's do that one. I think
he's going for it.
I think coffee with an historic figure, although it would have to change it to probably to whiskey. Because I don't think he drank coffee. Is Churchill.
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill, yeah.
Okay, favorite Winston Churchill quote.
Never, 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 never give up.
Okay. Appeasement. Who was the prime minister before Winston Churchill? Appeasement.
Neville Chamberlain.
Come on, guy. Yes, let's go. History majors united.
Yeah, I mean, the guy saved Western civilization, man. Look, I know he gets...
The Ukraine. Not to get super political right now. Ukraine, appeasement. Hello.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it appeasement, but it's funny. I have an ongoing, it used to be a debate, and now he's on my side with a friend of mine. When Ukraine first started, I said, we need to be bombing Russia right now. We need to be asserting against Russia right now.
The United States, personally?
Yeah, we need to be aggressive against them. And because this is just going to get worse for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I don't know about that, man. He's like, I'm all about sending support and stuff like that and doing what we can. And then as things got worse and worse and worse, his text messages just keep coming in. You know what, man? I think you're right. I think we should have been more aggressive with them.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, I don't get the whole thing that's going, like the other day, you know, they decided to send tanks and they said they were going to send 31. I'm like, what's that? Like, where did that number come from? Where did they pull that 31 out of their ass?
That's all that would fit. That's all that would fit.
That's all it's going to, I don't know. It, like you said, not to get too political, it's atrocious what's happening there.
Yeah.
To those people. And, you know,
if you're going to spend, man.
If you're going to spend $800 billion a year on defense, you better damn well use it. You know, there's the old quote, I can't remember who said it, the politician, that, you know, the difference between Republicans and Democrats is that Republicans want to spend a lot of money on the military and they never want to use it. And Democrats want to spend a little bit of money on the military and they want to use it everywhere. You know, in sense of like humanitarian things and stuff like that. I think that's the quote. It might, if it's wrong, we'll cut it out, but I think that's it. But yeah, I think coffee, bourbon with Churchill would be really interesting.
That does sound like a cool dude. Yeah.
And look, I know he gets a lot of flack because of his feelings toward other races and things like that. It's unfortunate, but you know,
you got to look at the times.
I was just going to say, man,
you got to look at the times.
You can't judge people by today's criteria.
Oh my, definitely not today. Maybe even 10 years ago you could do it, but not even today's criteria. Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
He said a lot of negative stuff about black people in Africa. He lived in Africa for a period of time. Mm-hmm. He said a lot of negative stuff about them. He differentiated himself as Indian from the Africans. Mm-hmm. He was in Africa. He differentiated himself, his race, from their race in the eyes of the white race that was like, you know, apartheid and all that. And they're giving him flack for that. I'm like, dude, the guy was trying to fight for his people, not humankind and equality. He was trying to fight for rights for his group of people, but there's a group of people out there that want to, you know, they want to assassinate his character. MLK, they want to assassinate his character.
Right.
Oh, he was a womanizer, all this. Like, you know, nobody's perfect, you know,
nobody's
right?
Perfect. So, and I think you gotta evaluate people's lives based on their entire life's work.
Right.
You know, not on one particular incident or something like that. But unfortunately, we're prisoners in the moment, man. You know, we try to measure everything
hostages
by today's
in
standard.
The moment.
You know, so it's unfortunate. But, well, I think your other question was if I had $1 million and I had to spend it.
Gotta burn it in one day. You gotta use it. It's like that Eddie Murphy movie. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Was it Eddie Murphy or was it Richard Pryor? There
was
one with Richard Pryor.
Now we both sound racist. I don't know. One of us is right.
No. There was one a long time ago.
It might have been Richard Pryor. It was that time.
Richard Pryor and John Candy.
No.
And he was a baseball player or something, and he got this money and he had to spend it all in one time.
It was Eddie Murphy?
In any event.
Dude. No, I got to Google that now. I don't know, man.
Can you spend it on charity?
I just watched an Eddie Murphy movie, actually. It was really good. It was called
I'm hearing from the Peanut Gallery you can't spend it on money.
You people.
I mean
can you spend it on charity? You can't just donate it to charity.
Okay. By the way, that You People movie was pretty funny.
It was hilarious. Yeah, that was a good movie. I
thought the end was a little corny.
That was so cheesy.
I don't want to give it away, but it was a little corny.
Yeah, that was cheesy.
But very funny and a cool cast.
It might have been Richard Pryor, dude.
$1 million in one day. I'd certainly buy a Corvette because it's my favorite car.
You were right. It's Brewster's Million.
Brewster's Million.
Yeah,
that's it.
It was Richard Pryor.
Yeah. Trading Places, right. Trading Places was with Dan Aykroyd. And Eddie Murphy, but he didn't have to spend money in that. It's just they put him into. If you remember that movie, they switched him.
They switched the two guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy was like a panhandler, and
Dan Aykroyd
was
dude.
like this sophisticated, you know, rich guy, and they switched him. The two, Mortimer and the other guy, that were the head of the firm, the trading firm, set it up and switched him. You know, basically got Aykroyd arrested. On trumped up stuff. They planted cocaine in his jacket, and they switched places. And they made a $1 bet to see whether or not if they put Eddie in this different circumstance, whether he would succeed or whether he'd still be the same old panhandler.
Okay.
And he managed to become like this really successful trader.
This has turned into a great 1980s movie reference movie.
Oh, that's one of the greatest movies, man. That's got to be like, that's certainly on my top 20.
Yeah, those were good movies, yeah.
But I'd buy a Corvette.
What year?
I'm a C5 fan, so I'd probably buy a late C5, which would be like 2003 or 2004.
Okay.
But I'd want it to be like really. I have a C5, and it's in very good shape, but it's not like pristine.
Okay.
But I'd probably buy a brand new one.
Yeah, those are sick.
Yeah.
Right now they just look beautiful.
Yeah. And I wouldn't waste my money on the Z06. Just for an extra $60,000. I don't need 670 horsepower.
Yeah.
495 is plenty.
Yeah.
I'd buy my wife something nice. Probably pay off the house.
Getting some points there. I'll buy my wife something nice.
Yeah, for sure. I'd pay off the house. Buy my wife something nice. I'd probably buy her. She loves the 65 Mustang.
Okay.
Probably buy her a really nice restored 65 Mustang. She had one about 10 years ago. I bought her one.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But it wound up being a money pit, and we got rid of it. I'd buy my sister and my nephew something nice. Buy my parents something nice.
Boats, planes?
Nah.
Nothing?
The only thing better than a boat is a friend with a boat.
Yeah, that's true. I got rid of my boat. I had a 35-foot center console. I was working every day, working on the weekends, and then my buddy Chris says, "Hey, I'm going to the Bahamas this weekend on your boat. I just met this girl, and I told her I'd take her out." And he literally met a girl on Friday, took her on the boat the next day to the Bahamas, and I'm at work on Saturday the whole day, and I'm just thinking, man. So when he came back, I said, "Chris, you're selling my boat," and now he's happily married. See?
Nice. Yeah, no boats, no planes.
We're gonna have to cut that scene because he didn't get married to the girl. He got married to a different chick.
By the you're not using it anymore. By the time I buy myself the Corvette and my mom, my sister, my wife, and my nephew something nice and pay off the house,
yeah,
I'm not gonna have enough money for a boat. I'm going to buy a paddle boat. I'm not and plane,
yeah, in this market, yeah.
A plane. What do the planes go for now? 30, 40 million?
No. Before the pandemic. Before the pandemic,
what are you could get a Cessna.
Yeah, you could get one for $100,000.
Dude, I'm not
before the pandemic. Now
one
you
of life's
anything.
rules. Okay. You never fly in a plane that only has one engine. Never. So no, if you're gonna buy a plane, you got to buy a jet. And what's the cheapest
you could get a jet? You could get a jet for $1 million. You get a jet
yeah, but that just blows my whole $1 million.
There you go. You're right.
On a plane, no. I want to.
You do the Grant Cardone thing. You put down 10%. You finance the plane for the rest.
Oh, we didn't. No, we didn't get into financing. Now that's a totally different story.
You can't get financing like that in a day. That'd be awesome if you could. Oh my gosh.
No, and I'd love it, man. Yeah. If you got an extra $1 million laying around, anybody send it my way. I'll make good use of it.
Let's go. Let's get it. It's all under the table here. Yeah. The table's just.
You got like a little secret hatch.
Yeah, I got the safe over there, but there's not $1 million in that. Yeah, well, although that guy
just
who
gave
came
it to
in
the
my
law
office,
school.
There you go. Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Almost $750, but yeah.
Well, plus the $400.
Plus the $400. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Plus inflation.
That's a lot of money, dude.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the 400 level, I don't think anybody had given.
Not at that level. Not that was an FIU grad. Anyone that graduated from the university that donated. I think, there's like the those families that donate a lot to the universities.
Yeah, but I don't, to the law school though, specifically?
Not to the law school.
No,
I don't. Well, no, actually, yeah. Well, maybe not at the time. I don't know, because then there was SPAC. They donated to the library.
You're right.
SPAC donated to the library.
That was
shortly after me. That was one too.
Yeah.
Shortly after me, they donated to that.
That's right.
And before that, probably some other people, but yeah. Definitely, that was a student. It was.
I think over the course of my time since I've graduated, I've probably donated 5,000. So I'm getting there.
Close second.
I helped raise a bunch, but they didn't collect it.
You did help raise a bunch. Cool. Any cases that you handled? Did you handle any domestic violence cases for the state?
No. So
what was your?
So I started off when you get there. And I think this is true of a lot of places in Florida, a lot of the state attorney's offices in Florida. You start off generally in either juvenile or misdemeanor.
Okay.
The main difference is that, other than the fact that juveniles are in, that you're prosecuting only juveniles in juvenile court, is that those are all bench trials. And you're prosecuting juveniles for misdemeanors and felonies in circuit court.
Okay.
Misdemeanors are obviously only misdemeanors. They're adult offenders, and that's before juries, and that's in county court.
Okay.
So you start off in one of those two places. So I started in started in misdemeanor for like a month, and then I went to juvenile for a year and absolutely loved it.
Okay.
Went back up to misdemeanor, and then eventually became a lead in misdemeanor, which is nothing special. Almost every attorney that goes through the office becomes a lead.
Okay.
And then I went to felony.
Okay.
So ended off in felony when I left.
What was the most serious felony case that sticks out in your head? Could have been traumatic. Did any of the cases you handled make the news in the felony division?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. What was just the nastiest felony case you've handled, where you're like, come on, guy, why did you do that?
I mean, they're all, a lot of them are all pretty bad. Unfortunately, I did not work in sex crimes.
Okay.
Which is, where you kind of
gruesome stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you see the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And, was fortunate to not have to, and would never have wanted to work in that specialty unit. The people in that unit deserve a lot of credit, because the stuff that they see on a daily basis is not stuff that you want to be consuming.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. To me, it's not so much the nasty cases. It's the cases that are the really violent cases.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I think stick with you. And because, like you said, it's like, man, how do you do that? How do you do that to another person?
Yeah.
Setting aside the law, like just the humanity of it.
Yeah.
And, so I wasn't directly involved in this case, but I can remember a case where this guy beat this woman with a piece of stuff on the construction site, rebar. I mean, just devastating.
Wow.
Just devastating. And it's on video.
Wow.
It's like, it's hard for me to talk about this stuff because I don't want to get into disparaging defense attorneys, because they have a very important role in our society and in our justice system.
Yeah.
But I know for me, like, you couldn't pay me enough money to represent that person.
Yeah.
And it's those kind of cases where you see victims who are really physically damaged that are tough to take. And the one thing that I think that prosecutors sometimes, or maybe not prosecutors, but people sometimes don't realize, is that when you're working those cases, no matter how small the case, even if it's a misdemeanor battery, that incident will remain in that person's mind for the rest of their life.
Uh-huh.
And to you, it's just one of 1,000 cases.
Right.
And it's really hard to not become numb to the numbers and just forget about, forget about what the victim has suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's one of the reasons why we talked earlier about trying to find a way to reduce the number of cases, particularly in county court, is so that the state attorneys have the time to really invest in those cases and sit down with victims and learn about their life. And because the more you can find out about them, the better story you can tell at trial. Yeah. And the more likely you are to hold somebody accountable. And I think that that's something that the system is missing because of the volume.
Right.
So, I mean, it's hard for me to put my finger on any one particular case that I handled that was, look, I was in felony for a while, but I didn't have the benefit of decades of experience like a lot of those attorneys have.
Yeah.
who see everything.
Right.
But
Okay.
yeah, it can be tough.
Okay. Got one for you. So we'll probably end with this. How do you feel about defund the police? So you were a former officer.
Ooh, getting all controversial on me
Yeah.
here.
Well, you just kind of brought up an interesting topic because I do think in a certain context, defund the police, it's not the right term.
No.
And it's not the right term. I personally don't like the term defund the police, but I do think the concept is there that we should invest some money into helping some of the mentally ill and some of the drug addict people. Invest some money instead of like calling the cops, arresting these people. I'm not saying we do a seance around them when they're having a meltdown on, heroin or something. But I'm saying instead of 5 officers tackling this guy, maybe, doing some I don't know the proper term for it, a way where you can kind of like put these people in some type of a program if they're willing to do that. We now have diversion programs in Broward, and I think Palm Beach County has one now. They didn't have one 5 years ago or so.
They have some significant diversion programs, yeah.
Yeah. But 10 years ago, they didn't have these things, diversion programs.
And there's still lots of counties in Florida that are like
that
diversion.
Don't. Yeah.
Like
Right.
even with DUI stuff.
Yeah.
There are some counties in Florida, like in Palm Beach County, your first DUI, you're not going to jail.
Okay.
Maybe if you
Let's
get
not say that too. Let's not say that. We want people to know it's a crime and you're going to get in trouble and you can kill
realistically,
somebody.
realistically, look, you're still going to pay a heavy consequence.
Right.
You're going to be on probation for a year. You're going to pay a fortune in defense fees. You're going to pay a fortune in fines. You're going to have to put a breathalyzer on your car. I mean, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
But you're probably not going to go to jail.
Right. Okay.
Maybe if you hit somebody and cause harm, maybe.
Yeah.
For your first.
Unless you seriously injure somebody, then.
Then that's a different story.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about serious bodily injury and felony and different stories.
You're talking about somebody has a couple drinks, gets pulled over, they're swerving a little bit in the road, they get pulled over, go to jail for the night, bail out in the morning.
Right.
Okay,
right. And
gotcha.
most likely, if it's their first DUI, and there are parameters, you can go online and see what the diversion program is like in Palm Beach County. It's public information.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get an offer to reckless driving. And keep the DUI off your record. You go to some counties in a little north of Palm Beach County, they're not diverting you.
Right.
And you're probably going to jail for a DUI. So, but to your question, I agree with you 100%. And it's so ridiculous because words matter. And whoever decided to come up with the term defund the police should... don't ever let that person around messaging again because it was the wrong message.
Right.
But I agree with you. The intent was correct, right? I think you got to reallocate the resources.
Some resources.
Yes. I think there are definitely, there are lots of things. I could talk to you for hours about thoughts I have about law enforcement and how we can reshape things. But one of the things that you hit on was, finding a way to maybe handle certain situations with, I'm not sure that handling it with different, because there are thoughts about there, like if there's a mental health situation, send mental health people out there instead of police officers. That's a bad idea. That's how you get people killed. Yeah. Could you potentially have mental health professionals that are also police officers and have that knowledge? Yeah, but that's expensive and it's going to be hard to find people that want to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So really, at the end of the day, I think one of the major problems with law enforcement in this country is training. Now look, I went to the academy a very long time ago. But I don't think the training has changed much. And when you're in the academy training, you are taught that every single person that you encounter is a threat to your life. That's the way you go into a situation. Because the thinking is if you're not alerted to that you could wind up dead.
Right.
So whether you're dealing with a child, they'll show you videos, or at least they did in the academy, of, officers walking up to a car where it's just a woman in the car. and the officer, for whatever reason, lets their guard down, and they wind up getting shot.
Right.
So I think one of the problems right now is that there's a reason for that training, because it is a dangerous job and you could wind up losing your life.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some kind of balance where, although you're approaching every situation with that level of vigilance, you also, and they do training on de-escalation, but that is not the emphasis, right? The emphasis is really on self-preservation and preserving the people that you may be going into a situation to protect.
Right.
You know, the old adage, it's better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6.
Right.
So I do think that there clearly, I mean, and I'm sure there are many think tanks and all sorts of nonprofits out there that have got hundreds of publications about ways that that law enforcement can be reformed, and it does need some significant reforming. But at the end of the day, I think that's a long-term process.
Yeah. You know what pops into my head really quick is the video of the guy. He's sitting down. The cops have their guns drawn, and the guy goes, "He's autistic. He's autistic." And he's like, the one guy has his hands on his head, I think, and he's like, the other guy wouldn't shut up and wouldn't sit down. And he goes, "He's autistic. His healthcare worker."
Oh, I remember that one.
The guy is autistic. He doesn't understand you.
Right.
You know, like, do not shoot him. And then one of the cops, just like, the guy's unarmed, just one of the cops shoots him. And it's like, why would you shoot the autistic guy? You know, it was something like that. And it was in Miami-Dade County, I think.
Well, look,
a couple years ago.
I mean, people don't want to hear this, but my experience, both as a police officer, though it was a long time ago, and as a prosecutor.
I saw the photos. You had a full head of hair back then.
I did. I missed those days. I was telling my wife the other day, I really miss going to the barber. Used to love going to just
You still got the beard? You could do the beard.
Yeah, I guess.
Not
but
the
it's
same.
something different, you know, just sitting in the barber chair, BSing. You know, there was something about that I really miss. But anyway, people don't like to hear this, but they're, by and large, and again, my experience with law enforcement officers as a state attorney, as an assistant state attorney, they're good people. They're out there trying to do their best. They're the first people we think of anytime something bad happens to us.
Right.
But there are always going to be bad apples. And, you know, I think part of the reform has to be, like we discussed, you know, rethinking the training. I think a big part of it, and I think you see this in the recent case with, God, I can't believe it's slipping my mind.
Right now in the news?
Yeah.
Tyree Nichols, Scorpion team?
Yeah. I think you see this in the case with Tyree Nichols. There's got to be better hiring. Those guys should have never become law enforcement officers.
Yeah.
The fact that afterward they sat there, putting aside the fact that what they did in the process was horrible, but to then sit there and watch this guy, you know, just no help, and then take pictures of him and send those pictures to your friend, like, you don't deserve to wear the badge.
Right.
There's something wrong with you. You should be on the other side. You should be where you are now in prison.
Yeah.
So better training, better ways to figure out who really is fit to be a law enforcement officer. And then the other thing, which I've talked to friends about, but I think would be really hard, is I really think that law enforcement officers on a periodic basis need to be reevaluated in terms of their psychiatric health, because that job can do bad things to your brain, just like being in the military can. And I think there should be some, and I think this could be done through legislation, increment or intermittent reevaluations for law enforcement officers. The problem is that I think, at least I would want to see that legislation also say that those evaluations are not subject to discovery in any criminal or civil case.
Okay.
Because you can't evaluate the officer and try to figure out what's wrong with him or her and try to help him.
Yeah.
And then try to use that to your advantage if and when the officer messes up.
Right. Okay.
So I think there's a balance there that has to be figured out. But I think that's one way that you can help, because a lot of these officers, particularly officers who are on tactical teams and things like that, they're getting a certain kind of training in police academy. That training is being reinforced with their on-the-job training, and they become, I don't want to say groupthink, but something happens to you, right? You talk to people who were in the military, especially who were in combat zones.
Yeah.
And it changes your makeup. You know, you can hear stories about people who were in, you know, in the Middle East in conflict, and how after a time they would do things that were out of character. And I think that can happen with law enforcement officers. So, you know, making sure that they get time away from those tactical units.
Okay.
You know, so that they have a time to kind of decompress and get out of that mindset and help rehabilitate them. There's all sorts of stuff that can be done, but, you know, I just don't know whether people are willing to go down that path.
You know, it's interesting. If you in this political era that we're in, if you make a suggestion like the ones that you're saying, a lot of people will perceive you as anti-cop, even though you're a former cop.
What have I said that's anti-cop?
That's how some of these people think, though.
Yeah,
they're like, no, we just need to support them and give. And it's like, dude, there's educated people, think tanks out there, where you can say, hey, look, let's have a meaningful discussion about this stuff. Nobody wants to talk about it, is what I'm saying. They just want to say defund the police or don't defund the police, and it's like we're coming down to this idiotic level where you have these thoughts that are nice, intellectual thoughts, and people are just down here at the base. They don't want to. You know, they're either defund the police or, you know, give all the police officers AR-15s and let's go get all the bad guys.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
like
that's,
what? Like, there's,
I mean, look, I'm not
common sense. Let's have common sense. You know,
absolutely. I'm generally pro law enforcement.
Yeah,
you know, I'm a former prosecutor. I like the fact that we have police officers out there that can protect us and that can help us when we need help.
Yeah,
and you know, like I said, those people deserve a lot of credit. The ones that step out of bounds need to be punished. They need to be held accountable, just like the criminals that they pursue are held accountable.
Right. It's hard though to, I guess from my discussions with law enforcement, is they feel like, man, I'm under a microscope now.
They are
everything
under a
I do.
microscope.
I got to wear the body cam.
They are under a microscope.
You know, they're like, man, I just want to do my job the best I can, but you encounter the situation, and I think what you said is important. That's where training comes in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
When you're properly trained, you know, it's just natural to you how to handle that situation, de-escalate the situation.
Trained and retrained.
Yeah,
you know,
retrained.
We're always drilling in and making sure you understand. You know, one of the things they taught us and what we would do typically every night before we would go out is role play scenarios. You know, you go to this particular house. This is what happens. How are you going to react? What are you going to do? And you have to you know, you have to continually do that process while you're working.
Yeah. You got me thinking about Reno 911 when you said role playing as police officers, and I'm thinking of the guy in the short shorts, and I'm starting to laugh on the inside.
But to your point, you know, that's the problem in our society nowadays. It's a problem in our politics nowadays, is that unfortunately everyone has their team,
right?
And there's no middle ground.
Right.
There's no, to me, there is a compromised position on almost everything.
Right.
If you can sit down and look at things objectively and rationally and not try to just be part of your team. You know, but if you want to marry yourself to a particular view just for the sake of doing that, then there's really no point in talking to you.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to have a conversation with someone who is all in, you know, like you said, you know, let's give AR-15s to every law enforcement officer and just let them run roughshod.
Yeah.
No, you know, but by the same token, I also don't believe that, you know, law enforcement officers should be social workers.
Right.
They're, you know, it's a dangerous effing job, man. And, you know, a lot of the times what we saw with the Nichols case is a clear-cut case of abuse. There's no disputing that.
Yeah.
But, you know, you'll see other cases where, you know, officer might be a little bit too aggressive with somebody. And the first reaction is, well, fire that guy and fire the chief and go fire the mayor too. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
That person, what if that law enforcement officer is a 20-year officer and he's decorated and this is the first time he lost his cool? You know, he had a bad day before he left his house. You know, maybe he found out his kid had cancer.
Right.
And he went to work that day and he lost his cool. And you want to fire the guy because he lost his cool? No.
Right.
You know, is there a consequence he should be paid? Of course. Yeah. And are there things you can do to help that person so that it doesn't happen again? Of course. But it's like this. The reaction to everything nowadays is fire the guy.
Yeah, cancel. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is that, you know, no matter what happens, you see it all the time. You know, it's remarkable to me. And I mean, I've listened to people talk about that sort of dynamic, and a lot of people chalk it up to social media and the fact that it's everything now is like a breaking news story. I don't know what it is, but it's clearly a problem.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking of the constant people that you probably see at the state attorney's office. I used to see it's the mentally ill person who's there every 6 months or every 3 months. They've got an issue and maybe not in the felony, but more in a misdemeanor. Right. And they just keep rehashing. And it's like, what do you do with this person? They just keep popping up. And there's people like that everywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, is arresting them, is charging them criminally the right thing? Probably not the best thing to do, but it's what we've got right now. And I think, and I guess that's where I'm going with. I would never say defund the police. That's idiotic. But if we could allocate some more resources towards helping those people get out of those situations somehow. I'm not the intellectual guy to figure that shit out. But that's what I'm throwing out there is maybe there's a solution for that where you can get them out of the criminal system and into something else. You know, the teen runaway. It's like,
yeah.
You know, it's like,
yeah, I know that it's if you follow the Broward State Attorney's Office, Harold Pryor and the public defender down there, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but they just announced a couple days ago a new initiative where they're going to take nonviolent offenders, and I don't know all the details, so don't quote me. But they're going to essentially take nonviolent offenders, and they've structured this sort of diversionary program in conjunction with Broward College. Okay. And they're going to they're going to have people get college credit as a way of working toward their diversion.
Oh,
and the concept is like, we want to get these people on the right track and get them out of the system.
They're going to put all the gangsters in college?
Well, nonviolent criminals, as far as I know. But look, that's a really innovative approach.
It's innovative. We'll see how it works. But yeah,
but
I mean, they're trying something new.
Yeah, you got to try something new, man.
Yeah.
You can't, like you just said, you can't go down that same path and lock everybody up.
Right.
You got to try to, as best you can with finite resources, to figure out a way to set up different paths for individuals that don't necessarily need to go to prison.
Right.
You know?
Gotcha. Yeah, because I don't think jail is always the best option for people, because if you're in jail, you're not making money. If you're not making money, you can't pay rent. You can't pay rent, you can't pay your car.
And then
you spiral out.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. One of the crimes in Florida is driving on a suspended license, as you well know.
Yeah.
And the legislature amended the law a few years ago to make it where there is now a 10-day mandatory minimum for, I think it's your third or more.
Okay.
Can't remember exactly, but it's what is it?
It's knowingly driving.
Yeah, 32203, I think, or 32223. Anyway, there's now a 10-day mandatory minimum, and that's actually
in jail for 10 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's actually not what you want to do. Like, yes, it's terrible. You should not drive on a suspended driver's license.
Yeah.
There are lots of reasons why we have a law like that. But like you just said, and what I tried to do as much as I could was, I wasn't looking to lock people up for driving on a suspended license, because that starts a cascading effect.
Right.
That will lead to other bad consequences.
Right.
You know, now that person is, like you said, out of work for 10 days.
Yeah.
They lose their job. And now they can't pay their bills.
Right.
You know, and it's like, think about where we live and how important driving is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so, you know, person's got to drive to take their kids to school, go to the grocery store, go to the doctor.
Right.
Yeah, you got your license suspended because you did things you shouldn't have done. Didn't pay tickets or whatever the case may be. But it's like, what do you expect people to do?
A little harsh, yeah.
Now people today will say, we'll take an Uber. Well, that costs money too.
Yeah.
And not everybody can afford that. You
Right.
got to not live in your own world all the time and get outside of your bubble and realize that it's tough.
Yeah.
And you can't be locking people up for that kind of stuff. But, it happens. I mean, I can remember a guy who had a lot. I think he had like 18 DUS adjudications.
DUS?
Driving under suspended.
Okay. Gotcha.
And this was in Palm Beach County. He got 180 days.
Wow. What's his situation, that guy? Why would he do that?
Got to drive.
But he doesn't have papers?
Unpaid child support
okay.
too many points.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Like,
I don't know. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Child support, I get it, but if he's a shitty driver, I don't want him on the road either.
I don't want him on the road either, man. I don't want him on the road either.
Yeah.
But does he deserve to be in jail for 180 days? Like, let me ask you this. When he gets out of jail after 180 days, is he going to drive again?
Probably not, because he's going to have nothing. Dude.
I don't know.
6 months.
I think that guy, if push comes to shove, if he's got to get to work, he's going to drive.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much of a deterrent it is.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. He shouldn't be on the road. But how do you fix that?
Right.
Right. You shouldn't be driving, but you got to drive.
It's got to be some kind of community service he could do to get back into the road, man.
Well,
down here in Florida, you can't.
Yeah,
you can't really
it's
drive.
hard, man. It's hard. You gotta. It's tough, man.
Yeah.
There's no magic bullet for a lot.
There's no uniform outcome in the criminal justice system.
No.
It's just, this is it, and it is. You get processed and you go through, and it is what it is.
Yeah. It's funny. I was telling my friend I'm not going to give away the concept, but I wanted to create a show or a movie about the criminal justice system and about its randomness.
The random outcomes that people could get.
The random outcomes, but there's also a lot more that's random, like the judge you get, the prosecutor you get, the public defender you get.
Is it your race is an outcome too with the statistics, or is it your background, or is that part of the concept, or no?
I mean, look, life is random.
Yeah.
My thought wasn't, or what I'm talking about here is not necessarily about those things.
Okay.
It's more about how the process itself, the system itself, is really very random.
What the judge ate for breakfast that day, if they're in a good mood.
Could be something just like that. Did the judge's football team lose over the weekend?
Yeah.
Can mean the difference maybe between you getting probation and jail time.
That's a funny concept. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but it's human nature. And like I said, it's the randomness of who's prosecuting you, how tough are they, who's your public defender, how good are they, who's your judge, what county did you get pulled over in? Like I said before, you get pulled over for DUI in Palm Beach, the outcome's going to be different than if you get pulled over in a county north.
Right.
It's like, it's all just very random, man.
Yeah, even some of these judges have political aspirations, and they will do what they want. There was that judge in Broward, Destre.
I don't remember.
He had Brian Greenwald ran against him. Brian Greenwald was representing a guy. The guy just got out of jail. He had duct tape, ski mask, bullets in his car, no gun, and he got pulled over for driving. They joke driving while black, but he had dark tints on his car.
Okay.
And he was in a neighborhood he shouldn't have belonged in. It was a very ritzy neighborhood and a really crappy car with dark tints, let's say. Cops pull him over. Oh, look who it is. The guy who just got out of jail. What do you have in your car? Duct tape. Huh. Ski mask. Huh. So they pulled him over, and the judge was going to put him in jail, I think, for life. 10 years, 20 years, life. Something crazy. And Brian Greenwald represented him in Broward County. I got to get him on the podcast to talk about this. And then it became news that this judge got this. It was like an 18 or 19-year-old kid. Just got out of jail for a year in jail. He did something while he was a juvenile. They tried him as an adult. And he goes, you're going to jail for 20 years, let's say. And he's like, you can't do that. They arrested him because of his windows were were too dark, is what they pulled him over for, and then they illegally searched his car, blah, blah, blah. He goes, nope, jail. Comes out in the news. The community comes out in support of this kid and says, you can't do that. He didn't even commit a crime yet. And he ends up giving him time served. Something crazy like that. And the judge went from here to here. Brian Greenwald ran against him. He lost, but he ran against that judge. The judge still was reelected. But with the election, and I guess that's what I'm getting at, is there was an election taking place. And the judge was like, shit, I better reverse my ruling and hush this down because I want to stay judge. So that was an interesting case. So maybe you could throw that in your concept.
Yeah,
election years.
Whether it's political aspirations or, maybe aspirations to get to a higher court, whatever. I mean, that might be part of why things happen the way they happen, but I don't know that that's really necessarily part of the randomness of everything.
Yeah. Am I killing the concept of your show?
No, but but the interesting thing about it is there's nothing you can do to take the randomness out of it.
Right.
And in fact, some people would say that the randomness is a good thing. Like, you want judges assigned to cases randomly. You don't want certain cases going to certain judges. Like, there are certain things, there are mechanisms in place to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. Yeah. But there's no way to fix that. There's no way to fix the randomness. It just is.
Right.
And, if you're the defendant, sometimes you hit the lottery and get a great judge, a fair prosecutor, that's not going to be overly harsh on you, and a public defender who's really good.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And you wind up, and I'm not saying public defenders are bad. I'm just saying a lot of them are overworked. A lot of them are inexperienced because they're just coming in. Yeah. And, you can't know everything about the law.
Right. So it's not even if they're good or bad. It's if they have those 5 minutes to dedicate to your case.
Yeah.
And not just like, just looking at the files while they're talking to the judge.
Yeah.
But actually take 5 minutes, get in front of the podium, talk to the judge, and present the case. Yeah.
Yeah. And, people don't realize this who have not been through the system or part of the system, especially in the criminal, exclusively in the criminal world, because this really doesn't happen in civil land. You're talking about in some cases where I can remember when I interned at the state attorney's office in Broward County while I was in law school. And the first time the prosecutor would talk to the law enforcement officers on the case was in the hallway 5 minutes before the trial.
Okay.
You're just like, okay, tell me what happened. I read your reports. Okay, you've been through this before. You know what a cross-examination's like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're going in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's no prep. There's no prep. If you're lucky, you met with the victim and, understand what happens and things like that. But
yeah, it's
just, you got to crank them out.
Right.
And that's not good for anybody, but it's particularly bad for defendants.
Right. It's good for, I see. It's bad for defendants, yeah.
It's not good for the system. You don't want to run a railroad like that.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people's lives.
Right.
And by the way,
victim
you're also,
and defendants' lives, both.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. You're dealing with the defendant's liberties, and you're also dealing with the trauma that the victim's gone through. And those people deserve time. It's like I was talking to a buddy of mine. I'm getting ready to on my podcast to do a two episode CLE on jury selection.
Okay.
And we're bringing in a guy who's like an expert in jury selection, but he's a civil lawyer. And civil lawyers are used to having days, sometimes weeks, to do jury selection.
Okay.
Jury selection in a misdemeanor case in Palm Beach County is 20 minutes aside to talk to 40-something people.
Uh-huh.
In a felony case, maybe it's half an hour per side. In a homicide, obviously, you're going to get the time that you need.
Yeah.
But, I got 20 minutes to figure out whether these people are going to be fair and impartial.
Right.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's tough, and it's no way to run a criminal justice system. But what's the alternative? Yeah. Where's the funding to hire another 10,000 prosecutors and 10,000 public defenders, and 1,000 judges?
It's all the PIP suits I'm filing in Broward County right now in Palm Beach County. The money's pouring in. All those filing fees from me, so they'll get somebody. Don't worry.
They're not going to. Thankfully, the legislature did give PDs and state attorneys an increase in pay. I think the minimum now is up to $60,000. But still, man, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, when you got people that are paying
triple
mid-year lawyers $150,000, $200,000,
yeah,
it's really, no matter how much you love that job,
yeah,
it's hard to say, you know what, I'm going to stick it out and do justice.
Right. So, all right. So, what do you do for fun while we wrap up this amazing podcast?
Podcast. My podcast is called Summarily.
Okay. How can they find it?
You can find it on any place where you listen to your podcasts. Just look up Summarily. It's called Summarily, a podcast for busy lawyers.
Summarily.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I can spell. I went to law school.
You can spell. That's pretty impressive. So I podcast. We do monthly legal updates from all the DCAs, the Florida Supreme Court, and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay.
To keep lawyers informed on the changes in the law.
Awesome.
So that I do for fun and love it. I especially love interviews with people and do a lot of those as well. Talk to a lot of interesting guests. We just recently did one on a Fifth Circuit case about possession of handguns. That was really interesting. What else do I do for fun? I like to tinker around a little bit with my Corvette, although I can turn a wrench, but I'm not a mechanic by any stretch. I like to read. I like to watch TV. I like to go to the gym.
Your wife always posts like funny gym stuff, right?
Oh yeah. She's a power lifter.
Okay.
And she's always been an athlete, and she's a power lifter, and she's constantly at it, but she's got some back issues and some shoulder issues and stuff like that, but she competes and has a lot of fun with it, and I go there and I'm her quote unquote handler. So I got to make sure she's ready.
The water boy?
Basically the water boy. And she's got a coach. What else do I do for fun? Come on your podcast.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thanks, man.
This was fun, man. I mean, I knew it would be fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was going to be this fun.
Hey, you didn't know it was going to be this cold.
No, it's actually warmed up. The lights did warm stuff up a little bit.
I'm under the vent or something. I don't know.
But, yeah, this was a lot of fun, man. I hope I can come back at some point.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate you being on here. It was awesome talking to you. I love getting your viewpoints. Really intellectual stuff. Makes me feel lowbrow.
Oh, come on, man.
But that's all good. Man. Don't worry, man. I'm just a PI lawyer. I'm just an injury lawyer. I don't do the sophisticated stuff. But
no, it's all good.
Cool.
And got to get some other people on with you, man.
Yeah, I got to get Jeff Molinaro on here, but I feel I got to have some food platter for him because he's always commenting so much on food every day on social media.
He's a foodie, man. He's a foodie.
Yeah,
he's a good guy.
Yeah, he's fun. He's smart too. He's really smart.
Yeah, he's really smart. Good appellate attorney.
Yeah.
And yeah, but having a good Italian hoagie here, something like that.
V&S Deli.
Oh yeah,
V&S Deli's great.
Is that a plug for them?
That's a plug for V&S Deli. Yeah, I get paid. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
They pay me in free subs.
Good.
Yeah. So where could people find you? How could they get a hold of your podcast?
So the podcast is called Summarily. It's a podcast for busy lawyers. You can find it anywhere where you get your podcasts. We do updates, legal updates from the Florida appellate courts and the Florida Supreme Court and the 11th Circuit. So we give people, attorneys in Florida, all the good news or bad news on cases that come out. And you can find me at Florida Appeals is where I work. So if you need appellate work, you can find me there.
Okay, cool. Scavone.
Yeah.
Love that name. Thanks for being on the podcast, dude.
You got it, man.
Thank you.
All right.
There's that outro music that he was supposed to play 10 minutes ago.
That's sexy,
dude.
Man. That's sexy music right there. All right.